I think if my channel is devoted to anything, it's to learning lessons from Webtoon series. Learning from characters' mistakes, their past, their futures, and their victories. However, today I wanted to take a look at their losses. The Boxer is a Webtoon original series that focuses on, unsurprisingly, the world of boxing. Now, as an introvert who would rather stay home and play video games, I had no interest in boxing before reading this series, and I'm sure many of you have had the same mentality. However, if that's stopping you from reading this series, then I beg of you, please give it a shot. This series is one of the best Webtoon series, just period. And the reason I say this is because this series handles characters wonderfully. But I'll stop gushing and get into it. This series mainly follows Yu, our protagonist. Yu is such an interesting character because of how little we know about him. At first, it might seem like he's underdeveloped, however, that can't be further from the truth because of how this series handles its characters, how they handle their backstories, their bouts, and especially how they handle their losses. So with the series seemingly nearing its end, I wanted to take a look at basically every character so far, seeing who they were entering the ring and seeing who they were leaving it. Starting with John Taker, aka the Rookie Killer. John Taker was the first opponent in the ring to face Yu, and he's a character I've talked quite a bit about, and it's the first sign that this series isn't what it first seems. John Taker's ring name, the Rookie Killer, and his overall demeanor really gets us excited to see him get into the ring and get absolutely wrecked by Yu. But that's kind of the thing. He did. It's a brutal match, so brutal that I don't really want to show it, but during the match is when things really start to turn, as we learn that John Taker wasn't always the Rookie Killer. He was a hopeful boxer, but wasn't really making it. That was until an accidental foul made his career into what it is now, made him into who he is. Into a boxer who purposely makes fouls, into a heel, a villain. Even if he didn't want it, he didn't want to be a villain. But sometimes the world needs villains. Sometimes people need a common enemy. But John hated it, hated the role, hated being so villainous, hated cheating, even hated the people he said he idolized, I'll get to them real soon, and hated that every time he got into the ring, people would hate him. Yu's victory was pretty much assured and John takes the loss. However, what I love about this is even when he loses, John and his coach gain an understanding about each other and become closer. His coach is a light in his life, someone who was always by his side through thick and thin. Through being the rookie or the Rookie Killer, his coach was always by his side. And John here finally gets to rest. He doesn't need to be a villain anymore. Moving on, let's take a look at Kasim Al-Jihad. Kasim was a very strange character in the world of the boxer. He's the grandson of the head of a global conglomeration. But what's really interesting is that he's like full-on crazy. He treats boxing like a game, like he's playing around, making a mockery of the sport by fighting in ways that are so contrary to what many boxers have been building up to and establishing. He's both changing the game and practically making a mockery out of everything. He doesn't care about boxing, he doesn't take it seriously. Like I said, he thinks it's a game. Confused why so many people take it so seriously. And the fact that he was practically unbeatable wasn't helping. It just made his reasoning even stronger. But of course, that changed when he fought Yu. He was always very clearly taunting everyone in the ring. However, after Yu figuratively put a hole in his head, the fight was a wake-up call for him. He just wanted to have some fun, but this is when he realized that boxing is dangerous. Boxing isn't something to be taken lightly. Boxing is something people dedicate their heart and soul and time into. And after this, he literally ran out of the ring. Our next important bout is with Jean-Pierre Manuel. Jean-Pierre Manuel is described as an artist. He's a boxer that seeks perfection above all else, pursuing the beauty that comes from the perfection of technique. And that's a direct quote. Jean-Pierre cared only for the fights. He would neglect just about everything for perfection. His relationships, his wife, his life didn't matter. All he cared about was perfection. And when he fought you, he was fighting to see that perfection. So he straight up told his coach that he would want to die in the ring to see it. However, we all know where this story goes. As Jean gets knocked down multiple times and is straight up willing to die in the ring, even on the verge of death, he was ready to fight. However, the fight gets interrupted by his wife, Stella, telling him that he's gonna be a dad. And just like that, something clicks in him, and he just hands the belt to you. No knockout, no running away, nothing. Jean-Pierre Manuel just realizes that there are more important things in life than victory or even perfection. He realized that the life and the family he was throwing away was more important than the victory and the perfection he was pursuing. Moving on to the junior welterweight circuits, the series really starts to fast-track these bouts, as there aren't really any important fights in the junior welterweight circuit except for the last one, the title fight against Yuto Takada. I've mentioned him a lot before. Honestly, such a cool character, and is often the epitome of a main character. He's strong, he's heroic, he stands up against the bullies, he comes from a tragic backstory, he wants to be a hero, he wins some matches and loses some matches, just like a hero would. He improves, he gets better. He feels like a main character, a hero. His non-stop hard work and dedication is admirable, especially since he started from the bottom. He's like a hero, a main character that all of us can relate to, that all of us might be able to become one day. However, much like all the other fights, this one is rather bleak. It's a brutal couple chapters, with every tiny itty-bitty amount of hope that Yuto regains immediately being crushed. Every advantage he seemingly gets turns out to be false hope. Even at the end, even when Yuto possesses something amazing, when he grabs onto something he's never had before, Yu absolutely wrecks him, more than most matches before. He lands himself in the hospital with a broken jaw and unlikely to ever box again. Yuto trained his entire life to boxing. He followed in his late father's footsteps to become a boxer, a hero, someone strong to protect others, and yet he just can't fight anymore. And honestly, that's heartbreaking. And speaking of heartbreaking, the middleweight world champion, Fabrizio Santorino, and his brother, trainer, and manager, Marco Santorino. These two obviously suck. They cheat, they lie, they use steroids, blackmail, and other incredibly awful means. These are terrible people, and yet again, I've talked about them before. Especially since these guys have the most heartbreaking backstory that genuinely makes me cry just every time I read it. Anyways, like the fights before, the Santorino brothers get decimated and straight up almost killed. So not only is you, they're also taking a page out of their book and using some more unsavory methods. As they say, an eye for an eye and an evil for an evil. Much like most of the title matches, it gets hairy, and Yu doesn't even knock him out, just keeps him fighting for the entire 12 rounds. I'll say Fabrizio barely lives, only being saved by the legendary boxer Jay, someone I should talk about, but maybe another day. Meanwhile, the cruiserweight world champion Viktor Grigovich is honestly an amazing character for basically the exact opposite reason. He's not super important, he doesn't have a tragic backstory, he's not motivated by anything major or impactful. That's part of his charm. He likes fighting and he likes mohawks. He's a big ball of fun and punching. The guy wasn't made to win. And while there was a fake out episode in which he did win, in reality, a 1.1 second title match was the more likely outcome. Nothing really brutal about this fight, just a fun match. But if you wanted to see something brutal, then look no further than the last match of today, Yu versus Aaron Tide. Honestly, the fight the series has been building up to pulled no punches. Yu, the champion we've seen decimate 4 titles before, and Aaron Tide, the old monster with muscles like a suit of armor. These two were destined to fight, and honestly, it's a long fight. So much happens in this fight. At a certain point, it feels like a conversation between two titans. Two people so extraordinarily talented and skilled that no one could approach their level. That only they could relate to one another. Only they could see eye to eye. But because Aaron held back so much, he couldn't finish the job, and gives Yu the victory. Honestly, this video is kind of depressing. Yu is our main character. He's someone we've rooted for to win, but over the entire series, we've seen Yu's victory after victory after victory, but Yu never feels like a winner. Every time he wins, we feel more and more and more like we're following the villain. But the people who lose? While the boxers at the start, and Aaron Tide, who's currently in a hospital, might not have the cleanest resolution, look at the quote-unquote losers before. I've already talked about how Jean-Pierre started caring more for his family, his wife and his daughter, trying to become the best dad, which is incredibly wholesome. But Yuto Takada realized that he did become strong. For his fans, for his coach, for his friends. Eventually leveling out with a new partner we get to see in a bonus episode. And the Santorino brothers? The ones who straight up did illegal things to win? They've turned over a new leaf, changed for the better, wanting to box without the cheap tricks that they've done before. All the losers are happier after their loss. They're smiling, they're happy, they're bright and cheerful. Meanwhile, look at Yu. After every victory, he's more down than before. He's more alone than before. I love the boxer. While I may have spoiled the outcomes of the fights, what I love is that while these fights are impactful, the outcome of the fights rarely have to do with the story. We know where the outcome is going. Yu was made to be unbeatable, but we get to see unbeatable in the ring. And we get to see something more important, which is these characters. And these characters, they're treated like people, not obstacles, not opponents, not villains, not the next challenge, but people, like human beings with their own lives, their own complicated, messy, heartbreaking lives. But that's all for today. So like always, thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you next week. Take care.